All right, so today we're going to talk about how to use color. Just some interesting background. Color wheel was invented in 1666 by, guess who, Isaac Newton, who mapped the color spectrum into a circle. And that was an important way to do that because it allowed people to see colors side by side in a continuum, not in a lateral way to look at it. And there's two kinds of color wheel. There's this one, the RYB color wheel, which uses yellow, red, and blue as the primary anchors of the color wheel. And then the RGB, which is red, green, and blue color wheel, which is designed for online use. And this actually was invented with the television set because the television uses three main colors, red, green, and blue, to develop its color palette. And in this color wheel, black is the mixture of all colors together, and in this one, black is no color. Again, we think about television sets and how they do color. So then we have complementary colors. We are going to talk about the yellow, blue, red color wheel, not the one they use for television. And that's because the yellow, the blue, and the red are what's called primary colors. You cannot make them from other colors. But you can make all other colors from those three. Okay? So complementary colors is the color that's the opposite on the color wheel. So the complementary for yellow is purple, for red is green, and for orange is blue. Those are the complementary colors. And the reason they're called complementary colors is because while they're at the opposite side of the color wheel, they go well together. They make nice contrast. So if you want to make a red pop, put green near it, and vice versa. And then how you tone those makes one or the other the primary look.
You got a couple color wheels to the one.
Sure. Yeah.
These were what, $8?
$7.
$7? Okay.
Yep.
Buy them.
So you can get a high contrast and high impact color combination when you use complementary colors together. So U of M almost does that. They use yellow and blue, so they're pretty close on complementary colors, and you get that nice pop with the yellow and the blue together. And ask questions as we go along. So then we have monochromatic within the color wheel, and that's shades and tones of one color. So you don't just have colors, now you have tones of color that we can talk about. So here's your monochromatic of a purple by adding white or black to that color. Then we have something called analogous colors. That's three colors that are side by side on the color wheel. So you would need to pick a dominant color, and then the two side by side are accents to it. That's good for shading. So if I have yellow and I want to make it look warmer, I can add a little bit of orange to it, and if I'm going cooler, I can add a little bit of green to it. So I can work these three colors together to shade and work a surface to make it look more round than flat. And there's triadic. Now, three colors evenly spaced on the color wheel give you what's called a triadic set. It gives you high contrast colors, but less than the complementary color. I mentioned U of M's color, so they're looking at this. It's not as stark a contrast as using complementary, but it still gives you a high contrast for that. And the same if they had gone yellow and red. It gives you that high contrast, but not as stark as the complementary color. Also, we'll talk about color warmth and coldness in a minute, but yellow and blue is more cold than yellow and red. So depending on what tone you want from your two colors you're using together, you can use these triadic colors in a way that gives you a warm contrast or a cooler contrast for your painting. And then here, this just shows the different way that it works. You can even use colors that aren't primary with contrast. So you can use a orange with a blue-green, or a violet with a blue-green. So you don't have to just look at primary colors. You can use triadic complements with secondary colors.
When you say cool colors, would that be like a bolder, it'll make a bolder presentation?
The bold, you can have bold
Warmer colors.
presentation with both warm or cool colors.
Now that picture that you had up there of the cabin out in the woods,
Mhm.
is that like warmer? Because
Yes.
it kind of blends
Yes,
in?
I would say those were all warmer tones.
Okay.
Yep, yep. And now you could even use, now this just takes it further and you talk about 4 different colors in a color set, not just 3. So again, you're looking at evenly spaced, but they're now quadratic instead of just a big triangle. So you get more options for blending colors a little bit.
So you're saying wherever that winds up, that's a good, if you're looking for another color, you got 3 colors on there and you're looking for a 4th color, you can look and see if.
You could, yeah, you could look here, yeah,
Combine it with one of those?
yep,
Oh, okay.
yep. And again, this gives you accents. That's what we're talking about. You know, Tom, you made a comment, an artist never uses a color out of the tube. He always is mixing it with something. Well, this is what they're looking at, what they're thinking about in their minds is, what do I mix with this to get where I want to be? And that's what these patterns give you, if you
You
will.
know, I don't, since you're the artist, if you took a sample of like let's say a tree, a sunset, and a little cabin, and it was a winter scene,
Mm-hmm.
and you used certain colors, and then could you do the same thing and use colors that weren't complementary and show how that doesn't look right? And you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like an amateur
Sure.
would just picking colors and
Right.
and,
Well,
and
let's
say this is what a summer scene should look like, and this is what an amateur didn't know anything about
Okay.
the color wheel. How
Yeah.
do you mess that up?
Well, hey, let's use your example. If I'm doing a winter scene, so I've got pretty much a white landscape. I've got whitish sky and I've got whitish snow, right?
Yeah.
So if I tinted my snow all with blue tones, which are cooler tones, but then I did my sky and I used yellow tones to bring the clouds into things, it would look really, really wrong. I have to use warm tones in the sky and the snow, or it's not going to look right. Or I need to use cooler tones, blues in,
Yeah,
the,
but what I'm
in the
getting
snow
at,
and the sky.
That's, you know that,
Right,
but amateurs don't.
right.
And I was wondering, I don't know how long it takes you to paint a little sample. And could you one day paint a sample of a winter scene done correctly, and then do another one where you've used some wrong colors to show how bad that would look if an amateur?
Yeah, we could try that next week. We could try
Yeah.
playing with that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a real quick little thing. But that's what this all does, is it avoids you doing those kind of
Yeah.
errors where I'm doing a sunrise in the winter and I get this nice yellow sky and pinks and things, and then I use a lot of blue in my snow.
Yeah.
And it looks totally wrong if I do that. And hopefully that's what you'll walk away from today with, is some more of that idea. So now let's talk about combining colors. There's 12 colors in the color wheel. These are hues of red, orange, and yellow. Chartreuse, green, blah, blah, blah. The color wheel can be divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, okay? So here's my primaries. These 3, again, yellow, red, and blue, because they're the colors you can't make from something else. Then I have my complementary colors, which work across. Now between red and yellow, we have 3 colors. This is the secondary color. That's a 50-50 match between these 2. Okay? Green is a 50-50 match between blue and yellow. Purple is 50-50 between red and blue. But then if I take purple and add a little more blue to it, I get a darker purple. If I take purple and add red to it, I get more of a violet. And these are tertiary colors because they're made from a primary and a secondary color. And then, of course, you've got a continuum between all these, where if you add more or less of one or the other, you can really turn this into a rainbow of colors. So remember, you've got 3 primaries, but you can make almost anything out of those 3. And if you have white and black paint to go with that to change the tone value, now you really can do a lot with your color. But that's why it's good to know this. So you know, if I'm working in the warm palette, which is this side, I can take yellow and red and work between that and get a lot of variation of color with that. Okay? Make sense?
So where are the warm colors and where are the cool colors? Can you divide
Yep.
that circle right in half?
Yep, I can. We'll do that, I think, the next slide.
Okay.
So let's talk about color combinations a little more. Primary colors that added together make pure white light.
So if you add yellow, red, and blue, you'll wind up with.
Yep,
white.
if I take these 3 colors and mix them together equally, I get white.
Okay. Huh.
That's hard to believe.
Isn't that weird?
Can you actually do that?
I haven't done it to prove that point, but
Yeah.
it's supposedly, now the trick is, most of this paint we're using aren't pure yellow or pure red or pure
Yeah.
blue.
Oh, okay.
They've already got some variation in the paint to give you the cornflower yellow or whatever. And as I said, you can't mix primaries from other colors. Those are, they got to be created on their own. And then the secondary colors, as we talked about, are the mixing of the 2. So if I take yellow and blue, I get green and so forth. And then the tertiary colors are the combining of a primary and a secondary. So yellow and green make yellow-green. Here's your warm and cold. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So if you're doing a summer scene, you should be, everything should be on that side of the wheel.
Yeah,
Everything.
typically, yeah. Yep. Now, the offset of that, Tom, would be, so I'm doing a summer scene, but I've got a shadow. And I wanted that shadow to look a little, like under a tree or something, a little cooler. Then I can add a little tint of one of these shades into it to show that I do have a cooler area in the painting. But you got to be careful with that, because if you overdo it, it looks odd.
Yeah.
But you can use a cool color in a warm scene to show us a contrast of temperature, literally,
Oh, okay.
in the painting.
And light direction as well,
Pardon me?
and direction of the light.
You got to pay attention to the direction of your light, always.
Yeah.
That's the most important part of painting is where's your light?
There's this
Yep.
like with painting a tree in the sunshine, part of it's going to be generally with sun shining on it, which means it's going to have probably a little yellow to it. And then the other side's going to be in a little bit of shade.
Yeah,
So it's not gonna all just be green.
Right.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's how you.
That's an important.
That's how you
an
create
important concept.
round surfaces. Like, if I look at this, then the hard part of this was technically, and you pointed this out, Jerry, is this is all in shadow
Oh, okay.
because the sun's behind everything.
Yeah,
So you got to be careful not making this too bright.
yeah.
But you can see on the log, I've got the lighter side here at the top because the sun's coming in here, and then the darker towards the bottom.
Okay.
And here,
All right.
they're lighter on this side because the sun's coming in,
I didn't even think about
and darker on this side because it's away from the sun.
Yeah.
So you got to always pay attention. Where's your light? And in my Santa Claus, I have the window. So that's my light source coming into that
Okay,
drawing.
yeah.
So as I paint that next week, you'll see I'm trying to make sure that everything on the window side of the picture is lighter than the other side of the
Okay,
card.
all right.
Okay?
Okay, on this one
That's a
though,
biggie.
that's a summer scene with a whole lot of blue in it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, of course,
Yeah.
the water's blue, but I mean,
Well, it's early morning. It's cool. It's and again, what's the mood that you want?
Yeah.
Do you want this to be a bright sunlit picture or an early morning cooler kind of scene?
yeah.
And the water is reflecting the sky.
Right.
And water's not blue. If the sky's blue, it'll look blue.
Yeah, you can see in my water here, I actually started out with this dark green blue color and then added over the top of it layers of color as I worked towards the sun, making it lighter.
So you put a lot of thought into that as opposed to the way we did ours. We just grabbed some paint and slapped it on there.
Well, one of the things that sounds paradoxical is you have to paint dark to make light.
Yeah.
But if you think about it a minute, if you don't have a dark something behind what you want light, it won't look light.
Yeah.
Say that again?
You have to paint dark to make light. Because if you just start with a light surface and put light stuff on it,
Yeah.
there's no contrast. There's no light and dark there.
Oh,
So you have to create a dark underlayment to then build your light on top of that.
oh,
So if you see guys doing trees and things, they'll start with a very dark green, almost if not black, and then they'll build the color forward to get the light leaves and sunlight onto it from that.
okay, all right. I think I see that.
Yeah,
So
that Bob Ross does all that
Bob Ross,
background stuff,
Yep.
and then he starts adding this, the foreground stuff gets
Yep.
lighter and lighter as
Yeah.
it comes forward.
Yep. Okay, so here we talked about coziness, energy come from warm colors and cool colors. They give you serenity and
Okay, that's
So forth.
important too, that, say, yeah, like when do you use cool colors and when do you use warm colors, depending on what you want,
what's your mood you're trying to
what you
create.
want
Yeah,
it to say, yeah.
right. Okay, so cool colors, we bring to mind coolness like water, and warm colors, warmth, the sun, so forth. And you can cross this. Don't be afraid to cross it, but be cognizant of what you're doing. Remember that if your overall theme is you want a warm, inviting painting and want to express that, then stay this side. And you can use this for some contrast or shading. And likewise, if you want that cooler, winter, cold scene kind of an environment, stay primarily over here and use these as some of your contrast for where you have light. Now, we don't just have the different colors. Now we have quality of colors. Okay, so we've talked about different shades of a color. And the shade's created by adding black to the base color. So here's my base color, and then I started adding black. And you can see the different shades of that color plus black.
So what was the base color there?
The base color is red,
Red.
red, and then you started adding black to it, and it makes the red darker.
So you can make a brown from red to black?
Well, it's supposed to be darker red.
Oh.
This may be the color that picked up on the screen, but
Yeah.
it's supposed to stay red but get darker. Now, if I want to make brown with red, I add green to it.
Oh,
Add the opposite color.
oh,
If you mix two complementary colors together, you get a brown. So if I add red and green together, I get brown. If I add yellow and purple together, I get a brown. So that's where your browns come from. And you see that on that color wheel, by the way. That's a good point. On this backside here, you can see browns as we get towards where we're mixing the complementaries together. You can make a brown.
And that's just by adding more black to the original color.
Black will just make it darker. To make it brown, I need to add the complementary color.
Complementary color.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So you can see where I've got blue and orange. If I add the complementary, I get this muddy looking kind of color.
Where have you got blue and orange?
Like I see, I just got here, I got the blue and the orange shown here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay?
That area.
So as I add more blue to my orange, I get it muddier. And if I add more orange to my blue, I get a bluish brown mud.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, all right.
Right?
All right, I didn't understand that, okay.
Okay? And that works with, if I take the red and the green, you can see here, I get a reddish mud versus a greenish mud.
So the greenish greenish, if you want to make it lighter, you add more red to it? No,
Now, if I want to make it muddy, I add
the
more.
other way.
Yeah.
But I want to
So if I
make
want
it
my
dark.
red darker, I add black. If I want my red lighter, I add white. If I want to change the color of my red, I add a different color to it. And if I add the complementary, it gets more brownish,
Okay,
okay?
well, that's neat.
So here's tint. So a shade makes it dark, tint makes it light. So this is the same red, now I'm adding white to it,
Okay.
and that makes it lighter.
And does that show up on here?
I don't think this has anything about tints or shade.
I guess it does, if on this side where goes from black, and then you want, because I've already used that, I wanted that color gray.
Well, yes, there you go, adding black or adding white.
So I added white to my black until I got that shade of,
Yeah, so you see this is talking about shading, adding black, and you can see that makes it a dark green. And then this is adding white, it makes it a lighter yellow. And you can move that around and see how that works.
okay, I was looking at that gray right on the second row.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, this is neat.
Well, that's your gray scale. That's just talking about black and white mixed together.
Black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So,
you can see if you
I
add,
had a hard time finding that color gray, to buy it. But if you start off with white and then you just add a little bit of black, you get that shade of gray.
Oh, yeah, this is pretty cool.
yeah, and you can see if you add the complementary color, it shows you if you add blue to red orange, you get a violet. Okay, if I add blue to red, I get purple. You can see that on that, so you can see how the colors work.
That's if you're adding one to another color,
Yep.
that's what you get, okay.
Oh, yeah, this is very
Okay? So this side is about mixing the primaries and tertiaries and secondary colors, and this other side is more about value of color, which is both really cool, and there's lots of good notes on this as well.
Color on the outside, primary color, that's
Yep.
the red. And you turn this wheel, it says adding red, you get red.
Yep,
Then you turn the wheel and you add yellow,
you get orange,
kind of get an orange. And you turn the wheel again, add blue, you get a purple.
right?
Turn it again, now you start adding white or black.
So the white just makes it a lighter red,
And the black
and the black
it
makes it a dark red.
darker, almost kind of good. So,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's very cool.
Okay?
Yeah.
So shade makes it dark, tint makes it light. Now to make it a little more confusing, we add a tone of color. You can add black, gray, and white to a base color. So if I start mixing tints and shades, I can make tones. So a mixture of white and black together, gray, changes this to where it's not a lighter red or a darker red. It starts changing the tone of the color.
So you're actually mixing gray with,
So yeah, this is using
Gray
grays
with red.
with it. So it's
You've
so this
already
is
mixed
less
black and
pure
white.
as I move it. It becomes I use the term foggier. The color looks foggier.
yeah, okay,
Okay, rather than lighter or darker, it looks foggier to me.
okay.
That's how I think about it.
Kind of like 50-50 white and black to come up with
A gray,
Gray.
yeah,
and then you add that gray.
To whatever
To
color.
whatever
Right.
they
So
The
it-
red here.
yeah. So it doesn't change the color. I'm not making a red, green, or red or something like that. But I'm not doing the same as if I just add white or black to it.
Okay.
It makes it, like I said, to me, it makes it a foggier color of the same color.
Now, let's say you use acrylics, right?
Yep,
And they dry pretty fast.
yep,
Okay, let's say you go to that 50% tone there, gray and.
Here?
Yeah.
okay.
Let's say that's the color I want to use for something. Do you mix up a whole bunch of that so that you don't have to try and find that mixture again? before it dries out while you're painting, you know, a regular large area. Because these guys that are doing these birds and stuff, they say, oh, mix up a lot of paint and put it in a jar, put a lid on it, in case you gotta add to it, you don't have to figure out what your combination, paint color combinations were to get that color.
Uh-huh.
Do you do that?
I don't, because I don't paint that big of stuff. I don't have that issue. And I'm not, when I'm painting things like this, I'm using pretty small quantities of any one shade.
Yeah.
And I like to work, like this, I work a lot of the shading right on the piece.
I like the background, the water.
Yep.
Did you mix it and then run out and then say, oh, I gotta mix some more of that again and you have to figure out how to get that color again?
When I came up with this, the base color, yes.
Yeah.
I was kind of working it as I went, because I knew it was going to be getting lighter towards the top.
Yeah.
So I didn't worry about, as I worked from here up, that I kept that absolute same shade of green-blue all the way
Okay.
as I painted the water.
You kept changing
Because I
it.
knew I was going to be working it lighter as I went.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm usually thinking about layering stuff. I'm not trying to paint this one thing blue or this one thing. So I'm working layers of things. And I'll sometimes start out like I did with this guy, thinking I had a shade of blue I liked for the coat. But as I kept working around it, I kept mixing paint to do it, and I'd wind up with subtle changes in that color, which add texture to the piece, as well as I might find a color I like better as I work through it.
And then you ran out and said, I gotta do his pants, so I might as well do it different.
Yeah. But I can see the point of wanting to do that, but I'm not painting in large enough areas that I worry about being able to replicate exactly that thing.
I listen to those guys doing those birds and I'm thinking, you know, so the paint color's a little bit different when
Right.
the colors aren't always constant on everything you paint.
Exactly. That's why I don't worry about having large quantities of a shade or a tone or hue, because
You can mix this up as you go. I mean, literally, you know, I was doing a blue to a lighter blue. I'll have white on one side and the blue the other one, and I just keep adding white as I go along. In fact, sometimes I'll just add it, and while the paint is on the surface, just blend it in with the brush.
well, all these feathers, I painted white, and while it was still wet, I started working with the blue. And I brought the blue onto the white and let it mix on the wood.
You know what I think would have been helpful is every one of us that did one of those, did you do one of those? We should have all brought them in, and then you could have critiqued the color choices we made. Not to be rude, but to try and give us some.
Well, if you wanted to do that, but I don't like to do, because I don't want to be rude or.
Because those guys at that other class, they are constantly critiquing it to try and help you. That's what they're trying to do.
Right.
Without being rude. And
Right.
what did you do wrong? What could you have done better? You know, stuff like that. And the color thing is difficult for me to try and understand.
It's difficult for a lot of people,
Yeah. And
I
like,
think,
Yeah, if you guys ask,
the
I'll
biggest mistake
I'll
is
help you.
open the tube and start using that paint right out of the tube. I mean, that's what an amateur does. You know?
Yeah,
So,
but you gotta start somewhere.
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. The good thing about paint, unlike carving, is if you make a mistake, you can redo it. But once you take a piece of wood away, you're done.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we can redo it.
we do, yeah. But
Some people get pretty good at repairing.
don't be
things.
afraid to experiment with paint, is my point. Because
Yeah,
you can always
yeah.
paint it over
Yeah, like an amateur
and do it
paint.
again.
Somebody's coat red, and then you got his face, so you go to the store and look for a paint. 'Cause
Well, now you don't have to.
you don't know anybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. So a hue is talking about, people talk about hues and tones and shades. Well, the hue is just the basic color. So red has a hue, orange is a hue, and so forth. But then I can saturate that with grays, or I can change brightness with black or white. But a hue is basically, when people talk about the hue, they're talking about the base color of what
Base
you're
color,
working
yeah.
with. Okay, now let's talk about using paint. We now know everything there is about color, so let's talk about using our paint. Depending on what you're painting, you may need less or more of certain paints. For instance, I'm painting this guy I'm not putting much orange on my palette, right? But I'm going to put a pretty good amount of blue. So you think about what you're painting when you start setting up your palette for how you're going to paint, or what paints you get out of your box. Don't put big blobs of red if you're working on the sky, you know, things like that. And the caution is, but don't skip putting some red on your palette because you might want to contrast the color. You know, red is a contrast to blues. I like to use white, shiny paper plate as my palette. This is what I use as my palette. Because I'm not mixing lots of paints and stuff, so I just use this and I throw it away when I'm done painting that day. So that's my palette. And I like having a white background, so when I mix paints, I know what I'm talking about. I have these, but I caution using something like this for your palette because you're going to have a different, you might see a different color than what you're going to see on a white paper. Okay?
Can I ask a
Yep.
question? When you painted that bird there,
Yep.
did you make the background white with a white wash or something
No.
first?
No.
So
No, I
you
didn't.
just painted right on the wood?
Yeah. Well, I sealed the wood, and
Yeah.
then I started painting.
Oh, okay.
What do you use to seal it with?
That matte spray,
Okay.
the crown spray. Actually, I used your sealant. I set it on a rock outside and sprayed it.
Okay.
And I put the paints around the edge, around the perimeter, so you can mix in the middle.
Okay. Makes sense.
And again, I try to work paints, working, excuse me, colors next to each other like a color wheel. I don't put blue next to my red, I put my yellow next to my red, and then my greens and my blues. So when I'm mixing, I'm pulling colors that are near to each other on the palette, on the color wheel to mix, instead of worrying about getting my greens and my reds together and winding up with mud. So I keep my color palette on my, color choices on my palette like the color wheel.
Okay.
Yep. And I like to keep the white and the black away from each other. So I might start with black, then have my reds working over to my blues, and then I'll have white at the other end of that. So that I have to work to make the gray, and I can use the black and the white in with the other colors. That's my preference. How you guys like to do it is your choice, but that's how I do it. So here's an example. Typically, I won't have this much color on my palette when I'm painting because I'm working in what I pretty much know is a defined set. For instance, when I'm working on the sand suit, I'll skip greens, typically. But I'll have some blue on there to create some shadow. But I probably won't have any green on there.
So let me
Okay.
ask you something. Let's say you're just painting red on a suit,
Yep,
just to make it simple. And then you want to put a shade.
yep.
Then do you take the one that's got the blue mixed in it and paint that over it, or is that blue mixed in with the red as you're doing the red? I mean, are those colors liquid together, or you let the red dry and then you put the shade on top of it after the fact?
I like to paint wet.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll bring the shading color in while the
Right
red's
while
still
you're doing
wet. Yep, yep. Now there's, like the stuff you're doing, the diorama, you want that dry paint.
Yeah, and do
Technique.
a lot of dry brushing
Yeah.
on top of that
Yes,
with a second color, yeah.
yep. So there's times you do want to do dry painting, but for most of the time, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I'm doing it wet. While the paint's wet. And then, and again, how I shade it or lighten it depends on what I'm trying to get out of it. So I might, for shade, instead of using red and black, I might use red and purple or red and blue. I might, but rarely use red and green because that gives you that brownish color to it, depending on what I'm trying to get from it. But, and to lighten it, I might use this and this rather than this and this. Again, depending on what my light source is and what color temperature I'm trying to get with my painting.
I know in those dioramas that, you know, using paint very subtly is really the trick to that. And the colors that you do on the buildings and things like that are, once they're dry, and then you use a stiff brush
Mm-hmm.
with very little paint on it, and you drag it across and try to pick up the highlights. Anything that's
Right.
3D to make it look like the sun showing,
Yep.
shining on it, and made it
Yeah.
so you can see the 3D effect.
Yep.
of it.
Now on this guy, where I was looking for the scruff on the leather and stuff, that's basically dry brushing.
Okay.
That's how I did that, and the toes of his shoes and things.
And it kind of looks a little bit like his mustache was done a little bit like that to make the difference in colors there. Did you do any of that?
That was, I think, pretty much done wet. I did it mostly dark shades first, and then I went over it, I'd say a little bit drier brush, but still while the paint was wet to bring the highlights. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, brushes. You have lots of brushes to choose from with what you're doing. I have these brushes, which I use for very fine detail work. You can see how small they are. And that's what I use for a lot of my detail work. And this is one of the bigger ones. So, and I keep them stored like this so that they don't get bent or screwed up. And then for my bigger brushes, I've got the variety of them. But I tend mostly to use the square brushes. Or this one. I like this one a lot too. More of a rounded.
You get to a point, you wanna take a little break and,
Okay, well, we're close to finished, I think.
okay.
So I use this a lot for detail work, obviously. I'm working in this kind of a brush for a lot of large things. I like this rounded brush. And then I have a square one that I use as well. But I tend to use 2 or 3 brushes while I'm painting. I don't use a lot. Fan brush I'll use for trees, things like that, when you're dappling the leaves in. But yeah, there's my brushes I use. And of course, you'll see the guys on TV using this stuff.
Doing the sky.
Yeah, and
Clouds.
amazing what those guys can do with those things. I watched that and it just,
That's a
I'm
pretty
in
neat
awe.
technique
Yeah,
to pull that off.
yeah,
You do a lot of painting in a hurry.
yeah.
You know what
Who's the guy that wipes his brush on the post of this?
Bob Ross.
Is that Bob Ross? Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people that are critical of people doing paintings like that, like, now they're not really artists. I'm thinking, if you're not savvy with painting and you can pull off a picture using a brush like that, more power to you. I mean, I don't know why people are critical.
I don't either, because I think those guys are just as much an artist as anybody else. It's a different kind of painting, but
Yeah.
it's just as much art as anything else. It'll never command millions of dollars like some of the other art, but it's still art.
I remember in the 50s, my dad got a paint by number kit, and it had little capsules with different, maybe
Yep.
50 of those different colors, and the picture had all these different numbers. Yeah, it took him 100 years to
I did those as a
And
kid.
that guy take that big 2-inch brush and he'd have it done in 15 minutes.
Yeah, so here's how you can use some of these brushes. Obviously, this is for doing fine lines and things like that. Like I said, a fan brush is good for doing trees and things, and you don't brush, you dab. And that's how you get this effect. And then a round brush, obviously, and you can do different techniques. If you load up one side of the brush, you can get this shading effect with a flat, wide, flatter brush.
What are they doing with the glaze?
I don't understand what they're trying to get across here. That's just another variation of this, using a glaze rather than a paint.
They do a lot of that to do flower petals. But they'll put 3 colors on real
Right.
close together and drag the brush through.
Right.
They get 3 colors on one brush.
Yeah. So that's probably what this is showing, is how you need a flat, wide brush to do that smearing effect. A pointed brush won't smear, basically, I think.
Yeah, something like that filbert one, we can see it's purple, but it's got the white going through it.
Yeah.
If you pick up that white paint on the brush with the purple, you get those colors all in one stroke.
Right. paints. I like acrylic over oil just because they dry faster. And I'm used to that technique of painting. Some guys like oil because it takes longer to dry and they can work in the wet longer and come back to it and still have workable paint. And I buy all the, this is what I buy. These, and they got a plethora of colors that you can pick up. Michael's or Joann Fabrics, any of those places have this stuff. Yeah, Hobby Lobby,
If
they
you
all
go to
have it.
Menards, you can buy a pack of 36 of them for something like $20. I mean, you got
Yeah, they're not
36
expensive.
different colors in them, and
They're not expensive at
you got
all.
almost everything to start
Go to
with.
Michael's, you might pay $6 a tube.
Yeah, yeah.
Now this kind of acrylic tends to cost more than this kind of acrylic for whatever reason. I think these are more thought of as art paint, and these are hobby paints.
Just a week ago at Michael's, these were 99 cents.
Really?
They had been reduced from $1.99 to 99.
So that's what I paint with pretty much is that. The other thing I do is I prefer a matte finish paint. If you think about looking around you, most things you look at are not shiny. Most things in nature look matte finished. So that's why I prefer to do my base work in matte. And then I have, I think I just had it up, a clear high gloss finish. That if I want, like I did on this guy, I wanted the leather to look like it had been polished. So I went over and painted that with that high gloss. Where I left the rest of it matte, I wanted that contrast to show that the leather had been polished at one point. So I put that clear coat on it to bring up the brightness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell from here to here, there's a big difference.
Exactly.
On the
Yeah.
type of finish.
So I use that clear gloss finish when I want to make something look shiny. But the rest of the painting is done, I use matte. You're thinking something.
I think Testers makes a dull coat spray. So you can paint something and then knock the gloss off it with this spray. Just spray
Uh-huh.
it on and it takes all the gloss off it. So if you're using a combination of those and you don't like the effect,
Right.
tone them all back down to no gloss.
But I think this would have looked kind of weird if it had been all shiny,
Yeah.
gloss paint. So I paint everything with a matte finish, and then I work highlights with using the high gloss clear stuff. That's what I do.
Oh, that's a
What-
clear, not a blue. Okay.
Right, it's a clear.
Okay.
So you guys can, figure out what you like to do. This is what I do, okay? What else we got? Okay, there we are. That's the presentation.
Very good.
Oh.
That's a good picture.
That help?
I thought you were gonna talk about those.
Well, we can, sure. What he's done here is use a very thin paint. He thinned the paint. He didn't change the tone by adding white or dark. He thinned it. So there's a
Use
translucent.
more water?
Use more water.
Okay.
Made it look transparent by doing that. And you can see how he made this look more round by using different shades to get his color palette.
Is that one you did?
Nope. These are all things I just got off the internet to show different paintings. And you can see he got warm with his wool, and his beard's a little more of a cooler tone. So he got warm tones through the coat, and the white of the beard is more cooler
I think
tone.
it's interesting too, if you look at his arm, he's got dark shades on both sides of his arm. So
Right.
it's not necessarily, the light came in this way and only shaded one side. It's where,
Well, the arm is round, so you're
Yeah.
going to have shadow more or less, depending on
Yeah.
where the lights. So the fact he's got less shadow here shows you the light's coming this direction.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. But again, like we talked, you got to be conscious of where your light's coming from. He's got it coming here, so he's got to remember that all the way down and across. So his shadow's got to be on the bottom and away from this direction, or it's going to look kind of weird. You got to be consistent with that.
I like what whoever did it, they did with the trim to distinguish the trim from his beard.
Yep.
The beard is a pure white, and
Yeah.
I don't know if he went over it with a brown, he had white, and then he went over it with a brown brush to get that darker color on
Well, you
the
can
trim.
see here he's used some yellows and some grays to make that look more, I guess, like wool,
Yeah.
more yellowish wool.
Going up and down
Then he's,
Just-
places, you know, the chimneys get kind of nasty, so that clothes gonna get old.
Just think, but on the one that we're doing, we got a place where you got the white trim right next to his beard.
yeah, and you can see how it's dark. It's darker under here, and it's a little darker under here, showing that it's shaded by the coat and shaded by his arm and the presence too. I might have made this a little darker here, I think, to show that.
And the bottom of that green box is really dark.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that one up
Okay.
in the far corner where he's got the different levels to make that brown, further back, did he do something special there to make that look different than the browner closer to the
So
brown?
you're talking about this versus
Yeah.
this,
Yeah, so it's showing you got the one up close and then the other one's supposed to be back.
right?
He's got the furrows in there, but they're not exactly the same color, or
Well,
did he do anything like
it's-
that on that one?
I would have.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think what he did more was the detail. This is very wide and broad, and this shows everything closer together, so it looks like it's further back. More than he used color.
If you're using the color, what would you do then? Make it darker as you go back?
It depends on how far back you're talking, because if you think about looking at a landscape, as you get further away, things tend to get lighter and wash into the sky. So further mountains look lighter than closer mountains.
Oh, okay.
So you got to be careful how far back you're talking. In this case, I probably would have thought of this being a little darker. But if I go back beyond these houses, I might make those lighter then. Because they're further away, and then as like I said, the further you go away from your viewpoint, the lighter things tend to get.
You know, it's light source too.
Pardon me?
You get down to the light source too.
Yes, yeah.
So you see how you can take that painting and critique it and say, I would have done this, I would have done that. I think it would be wise if you took our hearings and said, what we could have done better, without trying to be rude, just trying to help us.
Uh-huh.
Because for an amateur doesn't know, we just throw the paint on and
Right.
do what's best.
We'll
Yeah,
bring him in next week.
If you want, we can do
We've got
that.
our standards here now.
Don't
of course,
make
they're not
any of us
painted.
cry.
But whoever did this, he wasn't looking necessarily to add depth or anything with his color. He was just looking to add some highlights to what he was doing with the relief carving. He wanted his relief carving to be the
But this, on that idea is that you can take a flashlight and get a figurine, anything, and hold that flashlight on that figurine.
See what
And start
shades
moving the flashlight around, and as you do that, you'll see where you've got light hitting it, where it starts to be shaded.
Right,
Okay?
right, right.
I mean, the thing is, from a painting point of view, and I used to paint a long time ago. I've lost all of that. No, not all of it. Lost most of it. But you kind of need to think in a three-dimensional, you need to think in perspective. It's like when if you don't do that, the houses in the back, or the buildings in the back would end up being huge, but that doesn't give you the feeling of distance, all right? And where's the sun when you're doing this?
Right.
Once you put the sun up there in your mind and keep thinking of that, then you'll know where to add your highlights.
Right. And it depends on what you want the focal point of your picture to be too.
Yeah.
He could have brightened these, showing that the sun was coming in here and kind of dulled down in the foreground, or the opposite,
Right,
to create a different focus point for what he was working on.
right.
So yes, you're right. You can always be aware of light when you're painting. You said earlier, Tom, I thought about this before I painted. You have to sit down and think about what what you want this to be before you start putting paint on it.
Yeah, and I,
What that's
just threw the
the
paint.
first thing is think about, okay, what am I, where's my light coming from?
Yeah.
How do I want to shade it? And then what tone do I want? Am I looking for warmth or cold? And then start painting. And as you do more,
I did mine kind of like that bottom left one,
Mhm.
because I wanted to look like it was done on wood, and I wanted
Right.
the wood to show through.
Yep.
But,
so you did think about it and did,
well, that's
Had a plan,
as much thought as I put into it,
well,
let me tell you.
that's,
I'm a pretty fast thinker.
that's important to just decide that. What am I trying to accomplish? Just I want a hint of color to show something, or am I really wanting to paint this
Yeah.
just to show up?
Now, the only giveaway that yours is wood is the part you didn't paint.
Yeah,
Because the rest of it, you can't tell that.
Correct,
that,
yeah.
You know, it could have been ceramic as far as, you know.
yeah.
Till you
You
thump
did
it,
an excellent job.
Pardon
till you thump it.
me?
Yeah, but I mean, just looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
So was that-
Appreciate it.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Good.
Very good.